What's up, everybody? I think I made note or a hint of this not that long ago. Um, a story of something that happened to me in my life. So, try not to make this too long and dragged out, but yo, I got a story to tell. By the way, Stanwell number 12, completely unfinished. This is in original form, never sanded. Smoking Champipple, still going strong in the Codger Challenge. Um, Let me let you know, this Codger Challenge is starting to give me a little bit of weight on the old shoulders. Nothing hateful, but it's not as easy as I anticipated it. I was like, I could smoke one blend for a month, no problem, and I can. I mean, I'm today I think is like the 23rd or something like that. I'll make it through, but um, a lot of my smoking has actually slowed down just because of my son's baseball. So I'm smoking maybe once a day, sometimes twice. But I ended up mixing up the rest of the Sunset Harbor Flake and the rest of the Captain Black that I had because I got down. I probably got through maybe 2/3 of the jar that I had, and whatever I had left made it back up to approximately 3/4 of a jar. I will actually continue to smoke this after the Codger Challenge because I actually do like it. The Sunset Harbor Flake gives you like a nice, I don't know if you like those like bitter, sour kind of tastes. And then the Captain Black gives you like, I guess it's vanilla, but it gives you like that flavor and that smooth, I guess smoke or whatever. They go really well together, man. And honestly, I'm even considering throwing a little bit of Boswell's old school in here, which is kind of like a burley mix with a touch of vanilla as well, just to see how that goes. But that'll be once the Codger Challenge is done. So, my story. After I got out of the military, I was, well, I was pretty fucked up for a few years. But I was just I didn't have a job. I had a job, but it was just a BS job. I was waiting tables. I was bartending. Um, I lived in Jersey City, New Jersey. I was in Hoboken. I worked in Hoboken, and I was in Hoboken almost every night. And then once Hoboken was shut down, usually like between 1 o'clock and 2 o'clock on the weekends, we'd jump on the train and be in New York in 5 minutes. You know, you dead down in the village, go to the bars and some of the clubs and whatnot. Anyhow, I needed a real job. I really like food and I really like old classic cars, like muscle cars. You know, everything from the 30s on up to the 80s. Um, so I said, all right, well, either I'll be a chef or a mechanic. Well, I chose mechanic. And I was pretty damn good at it, actually. I worked my way up to being a ASE certified master tech as well as a GM certified master tech. I had well over 200 certifications for GM alone. I was a Cadillac technician. Worked on the XLRs, which was Cadillac's version of the Corvette at the time. And obviously other stuff too, but my caddy dealer is closed. So around 2003, 4, 5, GM was getting rid of like Pontiac, Buick, Olds, things like that. Buick ended up staying. Pontiac and Olds went. My caddy was my dealership rather was caddy and Olds. We got rid of Olds and we had caddy alone. That wasn't enough to sustain the dealership. Dealership closed. These things are blurry. I got fingerprints all over them. I took a job at a private shop. Private shop was in Irvington, which is not really a good city. It's next to Newark, New Jersey, Union, New Jersey, that general area, East Orange. And they did vehicle inspections as well as your regular mechanic stuff, trucks, like big trucks, bread trucks, box trucks, things like that. And we had a dyno. The dyno in the morning would run its self-test where the rollers on the dyno would spin at like 50 miles an hour. The dyno, you would just put the wheels, the drive wheels on the car, would go in the dyno so you can go at 15 miles an hour, and a sniffer would go into the tailpipe to test the vehicle emissions, whether it passed or failed. Well, I grabbed something out of my toolbox running 100 miles an hour in the morning, being real busy, and turn around, and there was some 2x4s behind the dyno. I stepped on some of those 2x4s, which caused me to lose my balance. I stepped on the dyno trying to gain my balance back. The dyno was rolling, put me ass over tea kettle, and my arm went in between the rollers and it got pulled into the machine. Well, it pulled me down so hard that when my head hit the diamond plate, I crushed my skull. The backside of my head here, it's called your temporal. I crushed my left temporal right behind my ear. It was as flat as a table. Having a little trouble keeping this lit because I'm jabber-jawing the way. But the owner pulled me off the machine and shut the machine off, obviously, and watched my breathing. He actually said to me, if you had stopped breathing, you would have died right there, because I did not know CPR. So they took me to the hospital. The ride in, on the ride in, I flatlined twice. They literally hit me with the paddles twice to kickstart my heart again. I was also in a coma. Not for terribly long, but it was approximately 12 to 15 hours. The coma was chemically induced because when I arrived to the hospital, I was combative. It's normal to be combative with a traumatic brain injury. It's just kind of one of those things that when you kind of became conscious again, your body took an injury, so it's fighting whatever gave it that injury. I don't remember any of this. I don't remember anything from that day. I only know what was told to me. However, I can definitely tell you that I remember coming out of a coma, and that's weird. This thing went out again. So you can hear things and then you go black again. Then you hear things, then everything goes black again. And I was saying to myself, wiggle a toe, move a finger, open your eyes, say something. And I couldn't. I was sedated, so I couldn't. And then all of a sudden, my eyes just popped open. My brother Mark was standing right there to my left at the bed. Because my mother was telling him, Mark, talk to him. He's coming, he's moving, talk to him. Or he's coming out of the coma, rather. Get him moving and talk to him. So when my eyes opened, my hand went right out to my brother Mark, who took my hand. And I can feel something like pulling at my leg, and I didn't know what the heck it was, but I lifted up, they had like a blanket, or like the sheet or whatever over me, and my first words out of a coma were, whose fucking idea was that? It was a catheter. They had put a catheter in, again, normal standard procedure. What I really greatly remember from that is that nurse pulling it out, because shortly after I came out of the coma, it couldn't have been more than a couple of minutes, they removed the catheter, and the girl just said to me, push like you're trying to pee. And let me tell you, this girl was like yanking this thing out like she was boating a marlin. So that was an interesting thought. I I was in ICU for a day. I was in the critical care unit for 3 days. I had a team of neurosurgeons. There was 15 doctors on that team that were running tests. And on day number 4, I had already called the day before, but I called a friend of mine to come and pick me up. I walked out of the hospital on day 4, and they didn't want me to leave, but I couldn't stay there anymore. People die in hospitals. I ain't staying. I had to live with my parents. Now, mind you, at the time, I was 32. I had been out of the house since I was 16, and I did not have the greatest relationship with my parents. The prior few years, prior to me falling, actually, we mended everything, and everything was good. I pretty much saw my parents weekly, several times a week, actually, but, always on Sunday for dinner. Some sort of Italian stuff. My mother always made a pot of gravy with meatballs and sausages and, all kinds of stuff, pepperoni. But I had to live with my parents, and I had been on my own for, 17, 18 years at that point. And that in itself was tough. I stayed with them for 2 months. And back, I wasn't a good kid. I got into a lot of trouble. I did a lot of stupid shit. To be perfectly honest with you, my father didn't even really want me around all that much. I guess that's why I left when I was 16. But even beyond that, we would maybe not speak for a few years, and then we would get to talking for a year or two, and then he was just like, I just didn't want you around. I didn't like the person you were. But when I came home from the hospital and got through all of that, I had a 3.5-year recovery. But during that time, I had seizures and everything. My father had at one point said to me, that I was a pleasure to be around. And I had made a 180-degree turnaround from where I was, the person I used to be, to the person I had become. And one of the things that he had said to me was, if I had known that this was going to be the result of you falling and breaking your head, he's like, I would have cracked your head with a 2x4 30 years ago. So, thanks, old man, But I think that was kind of his way of, I don't know, maybe breaking some of the tension, because even though we always didn't really get along and see eye to eye, I'm still his firstborn son. He almost had to bury his firstborn son. So my father was not a very emotional person. I saw him cry once when my great Aunt Ro died at 96. She was like one of the matriarchs of the family. He kind of lost it then, but only at the house, never out in public, never in front of nobody. It was me and him. That was it. But that accident is actually kind of what that's what brought me back to believing in God. For many years, I was an atheist, and I wasn't like a hardcore atheist. I just don't believe in God. I don't believe that there is a God. It really wasn't much more than that. But obviously, I had a newfound respect for life, versus when I was younger. I didn't anticipate living longer than 30 years old, just because of some of the stuff that I was in. My best friend growing up was murdered in broad daylight, him and his girlfriend. They were both shot and killed. I had another, I'll say acquaintance, because I really didn't like him very much, but he was also murdered. He was murdered in his house. Well, he lived in an apartment. In Jersey City, they had an old pencil factory where they used to make the Ticonderoga pencils, those yellow pencils that everybody had in school. They were made at this pencil factory in Jersey City, and they turned it into a bunch of apartments after the factory had closed many, many years earlier. And Jerry was his name. He was into some shit, and he was murdered in his living room. So needless to say, I just wasn't a very good person. And what brought me back to God was my accident, because I got that newfound look on life, that respect for life. And one of the things that has been happening since I fell is I started seeing goldfinches, American goldfinches. It's a bright yellow, neon green, sparrow-sized bird, smaller bird. Um, Now, this has happened in, I think it's 6 different houses and 2 different states, where I first started seeing them just like, you go up to the mountains or something like that, and I would see one just fly by. But they started coming to my windowsill and pecking on the window, and it's always 2 of them, which I now believe is my grandmother and my grandfather, her husband, Grandpa Ange. When I got divorced, I went to Florida, with a condo in Florida. I only stayed there for about a year because I just didn't like living in Florida. It's a retirement area where the condo is, so it's very boring. So I ended up coming back, and my current wife and I met. I moved into her house because she owned her condo. I was renting one in Pennsylvania, and that was in Harrisburg. This kind of like the suburb parts of Harrisburg, and it even happened there. My current house, it happens here. They don't so much come to the windows. They go to the apple tree that's right over there, and the apple tree is all blossoms right now, so they're loving that. But when we purchased this house, we walked in here and we didn't even get into the foyer. My wife turned around and she's like, "I love this house. I want this house." But in the living room, excuse me, in the dining room, there was a picture on the wall of 2 goldfinches, and I ended up telling the owners the story, my story, this story, and they let me keep the picture. So we have that picture in the dining room. But I guess the whole purpose of me even telling this story is just because simply I said it once before, and just don't want anybody wondering what the hell I'm talking about. Plus, I think it's a pretty good story because, through death comes life. Through tragedy comes respect, at least in this aspect, I guess. Through tragedy comes learning. And since the day I fell, since the day I came back out of the coma and I kind of was able to recover, every single day I've learned more about myself and more about life. And I fell in 2005, so that's 20 years ago that I fell. Again, I've told you I'm an old man, and you could see as the shiny dome. One thing that I always questioned, why did I live? Because again, I was not a good person. I was not a good guy, kid. I did a lot of bad stuff, stupid stuff. And for the longest time, I questioned it. I questioned the hell out of it. Like, what is so special about me that kept me here? Well, in 2018, actually 2018, my wife and I we got our foster license, and we adopted a child, my son, my current son. Obviously, questions are answered. And along the lines of Jesus, God, when you have questions and you talk to God, because when I was questioning why did I live, I was talking to God. God, why did I live? Why did you spare my life? Who am I? I'm a nothing. Remember what God was. God was a carpenter. Jesus was a carpenter. Jesus was a nothing. He was a nobody. He's just somebody that stuck up for other people. He believed in something, and he wasn't stopping any of that. And God was a common man. Jesus was a common man, and he will answer your prayers. He may not answer your prayers today. He may not answer your prayers tomorrow, but he will answer your prayers. And probably since about 2005, maybe 2006, I have been asking him, why did you spare my life? Why am I walking your earth? Why am I not in your kingdom with you now? And again, in 2018, it all became clear to me when he brought me my son, when my son's adoption was finalized. Believe if you want, don't believe if you want. But if you do believe, don't question it. Ask him questions, talk to him. He will answer your prayers. He absolutely will answer your prayers. And like I said, it may not happen right away, but it will happen. My son's adoption was 2018. I can't even do the math. It's 16, 17 years after I fell. So I asked that question and pondered that and wondered why for 17 years, and then bloop, right in my lap. It all makes sense now. So that's my story. Sorry I talked and didn't smoke. It is Sham Pipple in here, so the Kadri Challenge still going strong. Remember your Second Amendment, guys. Be involved in your Second Amendment. It protects all of your other amended rights and your freedoms. Have a blessed day. Peace out.